Pay very close attention, because what you are about to hear in the next 60 minutes will dismantle everything you thought you knew about people, about power, and about yourself. This is not a motivational speech. This is not a self-help lecture dressed in a dark suit. This is a surgical exposure of the invisible architecture that governs every interaction you have ever had. Every handshake, every silence, every betrayal, every promotion you didn't get, every relationship that crumbled in your hands while you stood there wondering what went wrong. There is a system operating beneath the surface of human behavior, and the vast majority of people will live and die without ever seeing it. But you clicked on this video, and that single act tells me something about you. It tells me you suspect there is more. It tells me you are tired of playing a game whose rules no one bothered to explain to you. So here is my promise. By the time this video ends, the world will look different. Not because the world changed, because your eyes did. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Not to me, but to yourself. Have you ever walked into a room and felt invisible? Have you ever spoken and watched your words dissolve into the air as if they carried no weight? Have you ever watched someone less intelligent, less talented, less deserving, command the attention and respect that should have been yours? Have you ever been manipulated by someone you trusted and only realized it weeks, months, sometimes years later? Have you ever given everything to a relationship, a friendship, a job, and received nothing but silence, indifference, or outright contempt in return? If any of this sounds familiar, you are not broken. You are not weak. You are simply uninitiated. You have been operating in a world designed by people who understand influence, and you have been following rules written by people who do not. Every school you attended taught you mathematics, history, literature. Not one of them taught you how people actually work. Not one of them sat you down and said, "Here is how loyalty is manufactured. Here is how trust is weaponized. Here is how silence can shatter a person more completely than any insult. Here is how the quiet person in the corner of the room is often the most dangerous person in it." And there is a reason for that. The reason is simple, and it is brutal. The system does not benefit from your awareness. Society runs more smoothly when the majority of people remain blind to the mechanics of influence. Corporations need obedient workers who never question the hierarchy. Relationships need one person who gives endlessly so the other can take. Social circles need someone to fill the role of the agreeable one, the accommodating one, the one who never makes waves. And if that someone has been you, this is the moment that changes. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this 5 centuries ago. And that understanding made him one of the most feared, misunderstood, and deliberately misquoted thinkers in human history. Most people hear his name and think of cruelty. They think of cold-blooded manipulation. They think of a man who celebrated evil. But that is the version of Machiavelli that the powerful want you to believe. Because a Machiavelli who is dismissed as immoral is a Machiavelli you will never bother to read. And a Machiavelli you never read is a Machiavelli who can never set you free. Here is what Machiavelli actually said. He said, "The world is not governed by intentions. It is governed by perception." He said, "The one who understands the nature of men will always prevail over the one who merely wishes men were different." He said, "It is not enough to be good. You must know when to appear good, when to appear strong, and when to appear as though you have already won, even when the battle has not yet begun. This is not cynicism. This is clarity. And there is a vast, unbridgeable difference between the two. You see, the world you live in operates on 2 levels. There is the surface, the level of words, of promises, of handshakes, of smiles, of polite conversation. This is the level most people never leave. They take words at face value. They trust the smile. They believe the handshake. And they are devastated again and again when reality refuses to match the performance they were given. Then there is the second level, the level beneath. This is where influence actually lives. This is where the real negotiations happen, not in boardrooms, but in the pauses between sentences. Not in what someone says, but in what they choose not to say. Not in the invitation they extend, but in the one they deliberately withhold. On this level, everything is information. A delayed response to a message is a power move.
Loyalty is rare.
A compliment given at the wrong moment is a trap. An apology offered too quickly is not remorse. It is control. Machiavelli lived on this second level, and he wrote The Prince not as a manual for tyrants, but as a mirror held up to the world as it actually is, stripped of fantasy, stripped of wishful thinking, stripped of the comfortable lies that people tell themselves so they can sleep at night. And now, you have a choice. You can continue living on the surface. You can continue believing that hard work alone will be rewarded, that honesty is always the best policy, that good people always win in the end. You can keep that belief, but understand this. Every person who has ever outmaneuvered you, every person who took credit for your work, every person who smiled in your face and spoke poison behind your back, they were not living on the surface. They were operating underneath it, and they were counting on you to never look down, or you can descend. You can learn to see the game for what it is, not so you can become cruel, not so you can become heartless, but so that you are never, ever caught off guard again. So that the next time someone tries to diminish you, you see it coming before they even open their mouth. So that the next time someone attempts to control you through guilt, through obligation, through emotional manipulation, you recognize the pattern and you choose, consciously, deliberately, strategically, how to respond. That is the gift Machiavelli offers. Not manipulation. Navigation. The ability to move through a world full of hidden agendas without becoming a victim of them. Now let me show you something that will shift the way you understand every human interaction from this moment forward. There is a principle that Machiavelli understood intuitively, and that modern psychology has since confirmed with decades of research. It is this: human beings do not respond to reality. They respond to the perception of reality. Read that again in your mind. Let it settle. Human beings do not respond to reality. They respond to the perception of reality. What does this mean in practice? It means the most competent person in the room is not always the one who is promoted. The most promoted person is the one who is perceived as competent. It means the most loyal friend is not always the one who is valued. The most valued friend is the one who is perceived as having options. It means the most loving partner is not always the one who is desired. The most desired partner is the one who is perceived as being slightly out of reach. This is not fair. But Machiavelli was never interested in fairness. He was interested in truth. And the truth is that perception is the currency of human interaction. Whoever controls perception controls the outcome, every single time. Now, most people hear this, and they resist it. They say, "But I don't want to play games. I don't want to be fake. I want people to appreciate me for who I really am, and I understand that impulse. I respect it." But let me ask you this. How has that strategy been working? How many times have you been the most real, the most authentic, the most transparent person in the room, and watched someone else walk away with everything you wanted? How many times have you poured your soul into something only to be overlooked by someone who simply knew how to present themselves better? Being authentic is not the problem. Being strategically unaware is. You can be completely genuine and still understand how perception works. You can be fully honest and still know when silence speaks louder than words. You can be deeply kind and still recognize when someone is exploiting that kindness. In fact, the most dangerous person in any room is not the liar. It is the honest person who understands the mechanics of deception, because that person cannot be fooled, cannot be manipulated, and cannot be moved from their position by anyone who relies on tricks instead of truth. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." Think about that. He did not say, "Be someone you are not." He said, "Understand that what people see is what they believe. And if you do not take control of what they see, someone else will shape their perception for you. And their version of you will rarely be flattering." This applies to every dimension of your life. In your career, it means that your work, no matter how brilliant, is invisible unless it is framed correctly. You could build the most elegant solution, deliver the most impressive result, solve the most complex problem. But if you present it without gravity, without confidence, without an understanding of how your audience perceives value, it will vanish. Meanwhile, the person who delivers a mediocre result with impeccable framing will be celebrated. In your relationships, it means that love alone is not enough. You can love someone with every fiber of your being, but if you are always available, always accommodating, always the first to reach out, always the one who bends, you are not communicating love. You are communicating desperation, and desperation does not inspire devotion. It inspires contempt. In your social life, it means that likability is not about being nice. The most liked people in any group are not the ones who agree with everyone. They are the ones who have the quiet confidence to disagree, the self-possession to walk away from a conversation without needing to have the last word, and the mystery that comes from not revealing everything about themselves the moment someone asks. This is not manipulation. This is intelligence. This is the kind of intelligence that Machiavelli spent his entire life trying to teach, and that the world has spent 5 centuries trying to suppress. Now I want you to think about someone in your life who has this quality. Someone who, when they walk into a room, something shifts. The energy changes. Conversations pause. People straighten up slightly, even if they don't realize they're doing it. This person does not need to announce their presence. Their presence announces itself. They do not talk the most. They often talk the least. But when they do speak, people listen, not because they are loud, but because their silence has already communicated that their words carry weight. What is it about this person? What is the invisible force that surrounds them? It is not charisma in the traditional sense. It is not beauty, although beauty can amplify it. It is not wealth, although wealth can fund it. It is something far more fundamental, far more ancient, and far more powerful than any of those things. It is the perception of sovereignty. This person, whether they know it or not, has communicated to the world a single, devastating message. I do not need you. I want you, but I do not need you. And the moment that distinction is felt, not said, not declared, but felt, everything changes. Because a person who does not need you is a person who cannot be controlled by you. And a person who cannot be controlled is, by definition, powerful. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote about princes and armies and alliances, but beneath all of it, the same principle pulsed. The one who can walk away from the table always has the advantage. The one who needs the deal more is the one who will make concessions. The one who is willing to lose is the one who rarely does. And this brings us to the most uncomfortable truth of this entire video, a truth that most people will reject, and that the few who accept it will carry with them like a weapon for the rest of their lives. Here it is. Your greatest vulnerability is not your weakness. It is your need to be understood. Let that land. Your need to explain yourself. Your need to justify your decisions. Your need to make sure everyone knows your intentions were good, your heart was pure, your motives were clean. That need, that desperate, gnawing, relentless need to be seen as you truly are, is the single greatest point of leverage that anyone will ever have over you. Because the moment you need someone to understand you, you have given them power. The moment you need their approval, their validation, their acknowledgement, you have handed them the strings and you have become the puppet. And the most sophisticated manipulators in the world know this. They do not attack your strength. They target your need for understanding. They withhold validation. They cast doubt on your intentions. They make you feel misunderstood. And then they watch as you scramble, as you over-explain, as you bend yourself into shapes, trying to prove something to someone who was never interested in proof, only in control. Machiavelli saw this mechanism 500 years ago. He saw how princes lost their thrones not because they lacked armies, but because they lacked the discipline to endure being misunderstood. They needed the love of their people so desperately that they made concession after concession, compromise after compromise, until there was nothing left to give. And still, the love never came. Because love that is earned through submission is not love, it is permission. And this is the fundamental error that most people make. They confuse being understood with being safe. They believe that if they can just make the other person see their perspective, see their pain, see their good intentions, then everything will be resolved. But Machiavelli knew better. He knew that understanding is not the goal of most human interactions. Control is. When your partner says, "I just wish you would communicate more," they are not always asking for communication. Sometimes they are asking for confession, for ammunition they can use in the next disagreement. When your boss says, "I want you to be more transparent about your process," they are not always asking for transparency. Sometimes they are asking for predictability, so they can manage you more easily. When a friend says, "I feel like you've been distant lately," they are not always expressing concern. Sometimes they are expressing irritation that you have stepped outside the role they assigned you. Now, and this is critical, I am not saying that everyone is manipulative. I am not saying that every request for communication is a trap. What I am saying is this: you must develop the discernment to tell the difference. You must learn to read the second level. You must become fluent in the language beneath the language, the motives beneath the words, the strategies beneath the smiles, the negotiations beneath the small talk. This is not paranoia. This is preparation. A soldier who studies the terrain before battle is not paranoid. A chess player who thinks 3 moves ahead is not suspicious. They are simply awake. They are operating with their eyes open in a world where most people are sleepwalking through a minefield. And Machiavelli, the real Machiavelli, not the caricature, was the first cartographer of that minefield. He did not create the dangers. He mapped them. He did not invent human nature. He described it with a precision that still makes people uncomfortable half a millennium later. Let me give you one more example before we move forward. One that will cement this understanding permanently. Imagine 2 people applying for the same position. The first person is exceptional. Their resume is impeccable. Their skills are undeniable. They walk into the interview and they talk. They talk about their achievements, their qualifications, their passion for the role. They answer every question thoroughly, sometimes going on for 5 or 6 minutes per response. They leave nothing to the imagination. They want the interviewer to know everything. By the end, the interviewer knows their entire professional history, their personal motivations, their strengths, their weaknesses, because they volunteered the weaknesses too, believing that honesty would be appreciated. The second person is good. Not exceptional. Good. Their resume is solid, but unremarkable. Their skills are competent, but not extraordinary. They walk into the interview, and they do something different. They listen first. They ask a question about the company's biggest current challenge before answering anything about themselves. When they do answer, their responses are precise. 45 seconds to a minute, no more. They make eye contact. They pause before responding to difficult questions, signaling that they are thinking rather than reciting. They share one specific achievement and frame it not as personal glory, but as a problem they solved for their previous employer. They say, "I think the most interesting question is how we can apply that approach here." They do not volunteer their weaknesses, not because they are hiding them, but because they understand that an interview is not a confession. It is a performance of capability. Who gets the job? You already know the answer, and you already understand why. The first person gave information. The second person created perception. The first person was transparent. The second person was strategic. And in the economy of influence, strategy will always outperform transparency. This is not an argument against honesty. This is an argument against naive honesty, honesty that is deployed without awareness of its impact, without consideration of its timing, without understanding that truth and the presentation of truth are two entirely different skills. Machiavelli understood this distinction better than anyone who ever lived, and now, so do you. So here is where we stand. You now understand the first layer. The world operates on perception, not reality. You understand the second layer. Your need to be understood is your greatest vulnerability. And you are ready for what comes next. The specific traits, the precise strategies, the cold and calculated methods by which influence is truly exercised. But those methods, the methods that will fundamentally rewire the way you move through the world, those are coming in the next part of this video. And trust me when I tell you, what you have heard so far is merely the threshold. The real architecture of power is still ahead. If you have felt something shift inside you, even slightly, as you listen to these words, then you are exactly where you need to be. Do not leave. Do not get distracted. What follows is the framework that separates the few who shape reality from the many who are shaped by it. Stay with me. The descent continues. You are still here. Good. That alone separates you from the majority. Most people would have clicked away by now, not because the content was too difficult, but because it was too accurate. Truth has a particular sting when it arrives uninvited. And for many, the instinct is to run from that sting rather than sit with it long enough to understand what it is trying to teach them. But you stayed, and that tells me your hunger for understanding is stronger than your comfort. Machiavelli would have respected that. He once wrote that the distance between how we live and how we ought to live is so wide that a man who neglects what is actually done for what should be done learns the way to self-destruction rather than self-preservation. In other words, the dreamers perish, the realists adapt, and you are choosing right now to adapt. Now, let us go deeper. In the first part, I showed you the foundation. Perception governs reality, and your need to be understood is your most exploitable weakness. But understanding the foundation is not enough. You need to see the pillars, the specific traits that separate those who wield influence from those who are wielded by it. There are 5 of them. 5 pillars of dark influence. And each one, when mastered, transforms you from a passive participant in the human game into a strategic architect of your own outcomes. The first pillar, controlled silence. Most people fear silence. They fill every pause with words. They talk when they are nervous. They explain when they are accused. They justify when they are questioned. And in doing so, they hand over every shred of power they possess. Because here is what silence does that words never can. It creates a vacuum. And in that vacuum, the other person is forced to fill the space with their own assumptions, their own anxieties, their own projections. When you are silent, you become a mirror. And people are terrified of mirrors. Machiavelli understood the strategic deployment of silence better than almost any thinker in history.
Patience,
he observed that the most effective rulers were not the ones who spoke the most. They were the ones who spoke the least. And when they did speak, the world stopped to listen. Why? Because scarcity creates value. When your words are rare, Each one carries weight. When your words are abundant, they become noise. Think about this in your own life. Think about the person who talks incessantly at work, always offering opinions, always filling the silence, always volunteering their perspective before anyone asks. Now think about the person who sits quietly, observes, and only speaks when they have something precise to say. Who commands more respect? Who is perceived as more intelligent? Who is consulted when the stakes are highest? The answer is always the same: the quiet one. But controlled silence is not simply the absence of speech. It is the strategic deployment of non-reaction. When someone insults you and you do not flinch, you have communicated something far more powerful than any comeback could achieve. You have communicated that their words have no jurisdiction over your emotional state. When someone tries to provoke you, and you respond with a calm, measured pause followed by a single, deliberate sentence, you have not just deflected their attack, you have inverted it. You have made them feel small in the very moment they expected to feel powerful. Machiavelli described this as the art of the fox, the ability to see the trap and quietly step around it while the one who set it watches in confusion. The fox does not announce that it has spotted the trap. The fox does not lecture the hunter on the immorality of trapping. The fox simply moves with precision, with economy, with silence. And the hunter is left holding an empty cage, wondering what went wrong. Practice this. The next time someone says something designed to provoke you, at work, in a relationship, in a social setting, do not react. Do not explain. Do not defend. Simply pause. Let the silence stretch. Let it become uncomfortable. And then, only then, respond with fewer words than they expect. Watch what happens. Watch how the dynamic shifts. Watch how the power redistributes itself in the room, flowing away from the one who spoke recklessly and toward the one who spoke with restraint. This is not passivity. This is the most active form of control that exists. The second pillar, strategic emotional distance. There is a disease that infects the majority of human beings, and it is this: emotional overinvestment in the opinions of others. You care too much about what people think. You care too much about whether they approve. You care too much about whether they are pleased with you, impressed by you, satisfied by your performance. And this caring, this deep, almost biological need for social approval, is the chain that keeps you anchored to mediocrity. Machiavelli was ruthlessly clear on this point. He wrote that a prince must learn to be able not to be good, and to use this knowledge, or not, according to necessity. This is not an endorsement of cruelty. It is a recognition that emotional entanglement with the opinions of others will paralyze you at the exact moments when decisive action is most needed. If you cannot tolerate disapproval, you will never make a decision that challenges the status quo. If you cannot endure criticism, you will never take a position that distinguishes you from the crowd. If you cannot withstand the cold wind of being disliked, you will spend your entire life building someone else's vision instead of your own. Strategic emotional distance does not mean you feel nothing. It means you choose what to feel about. It means you invest your emotional energy where it generates returns, in your mission, your craft, your closest relationships. And you withdraw it from the places where it is wasted. The approval of strangers, the validation of acquaintances, the admiration of people who would forget your name the moment you left the room. Think of it this way: your emotional energy is a finite resource, like money. Every time you spend it seeking approval from someone who does not matter, you have less to invest in something that does. Every time you agonize over a critical comment from a person you will never see again, you have borrowed emotional capital from your future self, from the version of you who needs that energy for something important. The person who masters this pillar becomes untouchable, not because they do not have feelings, but because their feelings are not available for public consumption. They do not perform their emotions for an audience. They do not display their wounds to gain sympathy. They do not broadcast their insecurities, hoping someone will reassure them. They process privately. They decide privately. They grieve privately. And when they emerge whole, not because they were never damaged, but because they refused to let the damage become a performance. Machiavelli would recognize this person immediately. This is the prince who does not beg for loyalty, but commands it through composure. This is the strategist who does not plead for mercy, but negotiates from strength. This is you, if you choose it. The third pillar, the architecture of mystery. Human beings are wired to solve puzzles. It is embedded in our neurological architecture. When we encounter something we cannot fully understand, something that resists easy categorization, our attention locks onto it. We cannot look away. We cannot stop thinking about it. We return to it again and again, turning it over in our minds, trying to crack the code. The most influential people in history understood this instinct and used it deliberately. They revealed enough to intrigue, but never enough to satisfy. They shared enough to build connection, but kept enough hidden to maintain fascination. They were warm enough to be approachable, but cool enough to be slightly unreachable. And in that gap, in the space between what was known and what was concealed, their power resided. Machiavelli wrote about this with characteristic precision. He noted that men judge by the eye rather than by the hand, because seeing is given to everyone, feeling to few. What he meant was this: most people will form their impression of you based on the surface, on what they can see, on what you allow them to see. And the less you reveal, the more they project. The less they know about you, the larger you become in their imagination. Because mystery amplifies, familiarity diminishes. This is why oversharing is the enemy of influence. When you tell everyone your plans, your problems, your insecurities, your hopes, your fears, you have stripped yourself of your most valuable asset. You have made yourself completely legible. And a person who is completely legible is a person who can be completely anticipated. And a person who can be completely anticipated can be completely controlled. Consider the opposite. Consider the person who listens more than they speak, who asks questions but deflects them when directed at themselves, who shares stories but never the whole story, who is present but retains an air of somewhere else, of a life beyond the room, of depths that the current conversation cannot reach. This person is magnetic, not because of what they give, but because of what they withhold. Now I want to be clear. Mystery is not dishonesty. You are not lying about who you are. You are simply choosing what to reveal and when. You are curating the experience of you, not fabricating it, but editing it with the same care that a filmmaker edits a scene. Every great film leaves out more than it includes. Every great character has a backstory that the audience senses, but never fully sees. And it is that unseen depth that makes the character compelling. You must become the author of your own narrative, not by inventing a fiction, but by controlling the pacing of the truth. Share slowly, reveal deliberately. Let people earn access to the deeper layers of who you are. And watch how their investment in you grows with every layer they uncover, because they feel they have discovered something rare, something not available to everyone, something earned. This is the architecture of mystery, and once you build it, you never have to chase attention again. Attention will come to you. It will arrive unbidden, pulled by the gravitational force of what it cannot quite understand. The fourth pillar: calculated generosity. Here is a principle that Machiavelli taught with the precision of a surgeon. Generosity, misapplied, is indistinguishable from weakness. When you give freely to everyone, your giving loses its value. When you help without discernment, your help becomes an expectation rather than a gift. When you sacrifice your own needs to serve others indiscriminately, you do not earn loyalty. You earn contempt. Because people do not value what is freely given. They value what is scarce. They value what is earned. They value what is rare. This does not mean you become selfish. It means you become strategic. Machiavelli argued that the wise prince dispenses generosity carefully, giving to those whose loyalty is genuine and whose reciprocity can be counted upon, while withholding from those who will consume and never contribute. He observed that princes who attempted to be generous to everyone inevitably exhausted their resources and were forced to become oppressive to recover what they had squandered.
We understand
The same dynamic plays out in your daily life with striking accuracy. Think about the friend who is always available, always willing to listen, always ready to drop everything and help. Now think about how that friend is treated. Are they respected? Are they valued? Or are they the first person to be called in a crisis and the last person to be invited to the celebration? Are they consulted with gratitude or contacted with expectation? The brutal truth is that unconditional availability communicates zero self-worth. If you are always available, you have nothing else going on. If you always say yes, your yes means nothing. If you help everyone equally, your help is a commodity, not a gift. Calculated generosity means this: help deliberately, give where it matters. Invest your time, your energy, your resources in people who have demonstrated, through action, not words, that they value what you bring. And create scarcity around your generosity, not artificially, but naturally, by filling your life with so much purpose that your time genuinely becomes limited. When your time is limited and you choose to give it to someone, they feel it. They feel the weight of that choice. They feel selected. And that feeling creates loyalty more powerful than any amount of unconditional giving ever could. Machiavelli knew this. He wrote that people are generally ungrateful, fickle, deceptive, cowardly in the face of danger, and greedy for gain. When you benefit them, they are all yours. They offer you their blood, their possessions, their lives, their children, when the need is far off. But when the need approaches, they turn on you. This is not bitterness. This is observation. And the response to this observation is not cynicism. It is calibration. You calibrate your generosity to match the reality of human nature, not the fantasy of how you wish human nature would be. The fifth pillar, the sovereignty of purpose. This is the pillar that holds all others. Without it, controlled silence becomes mere avoidance. Strategic emotional distance becomes cold detachment. Mystery becomes emptiness. Calculated generosity becomes transactional pettiness. But with it, with a deep, unshakable sense of purpose, all four preceding pillars transform into instruments of extraordinary power. Machiavelli wrote endlessly about fortune, about the unpredictable forces that shape human destiny. But he also wrote this: fortune is the arbiter of one half of our actions, but she still leaves us to direct the other half. In other words, you cannot control everything, but you can control yourself. You can control your direction. You can control the relentless daily pursuit of something that matters to you more than the approval of any other human being on this planet. A person with purpose does not need to perform confidence. Their confidence is organic. It radiates from the simple fact that they know where they are going and why. A person with purpose does not need to manufacture mystery. Their mystery is inherent. It comes from the depth of their commitment to something others cannot fully see. A person with purpose does not need to strategize their silence. Their silence is natural. It is the quiet of someone who is too focused to waste words on triviality. Purpose is the ultimate shield against manipulation. Because when you know what you are building, when you know what you are devoted to, when you know what you would sacrifice comfort for, no one can distract you with their drama, derail you with their criticism, or seduce you with their approval. You become immune, not to emotion, you still feel, but to influence from those who do not share your vision. And this is where Machiavelli's philosophy reaches its deepest point. He was not teaching manipulation for its own sake. He was teaching self-governance. He was saying, before you can govern others, you must govern yourself. Before you can influence the world, you must be unshakable within. Before you can play the game, you must know, with absolute clarity, what you are playing for. So ask yourself right now, what is your purpose? Not your job title, not your role in someone else's story, not the identity that was assigned to you by your family, your culture, your social circle. What is the thing that, if you pursued it with everything you had, would make the opinions of others feel like background noise? What is the mission that, if you committed to it fully, would make the approval or disapproval of strangers feel utterly irrelevant? Find that. Name it. Guard it. Build around it like a fortress. Because once you have it, everything I have told you in this video, every pillar, every strategy, every principle, clicks into place. Not as tactics for manipulation, but as tools for protection. Protection of your time. Protection of your energy. Protection of the one life you were given and the singular purpose that gives it meaning. Let me tell you what happens to the person who finds their purpose and protects it. They stop reacting and start selecting. Every opportunity that comes their way is measured against a single standard. Does this serve the mission? If yes, they engage. If no, they decline, without guilt, without hesitation, without the need to justify themselves to anyone. Their calendar becomes a weapon. Their attention becomes a currency they spend with the precision of a master investor. They do not attend meetings that waste their time. They do not maintain relationships that drain their energy. They do not consume information that does not serve their growth. And in that ruthless curation of their daily experience, they create something that almost no one in the modern world possesses: momentum. Momentum is what separates the person who dreams from the person who builds. And momentum is generated by sustained, focused effort directed at a single point, not scattered energy distributed across a dozen half-hearted commitments. Machiavelli observed that the prince who tries to please everyone disperses his forces and accomplishes nothing. The prince who concentrates his effort on the single most important objective achieves it, and in achieving it, gains the credibility and resources to pursue the next. Your purpose is not a luxury. It is not something you will get to someday when the conditions are right. It is the single most urgent project of your life. Because without it, every strategy in this video becomes a tool without a craftsman. Brilliant, perhaps, sharp, certainly, but aimless, and an aimless blade cuts indiscriminately, including its wielder. But here is where it gets even colder. Because knowing these 5 pillars is one thing. Applying them in the real world, in the chaos of your daily life, in the heat of confrontation, in the quiet devastation of betrayal, that is something else entirely. And the specific techniques for that application, the exact words, the precise responses, the calculated moves that transform these abstract principles into lived reality, those are coming next. But the coldest play of all is still ahead. Stay right where you are, because what follows will give you something most people search for their entire lives and never find: the script, the actual playbook, the moment-by-moment guide to wielding influence without ever losing yourself. Curious to see how this applies to your world? Do not move. The architecture is about to become operational. Now we enter the arena. Everything you have absorbed until this point, the philosophy, the pillars, the principles, all of it was preparation. This is where the blade meets the bone. This is where theory transforms into action. Because knowledge without application is just decoration. And you did not come here for decoration. You came here for power, real power. The kind that operates in the spaces between words, in the micro-decisions of daily life, in the moments that most people sleepwalk through, and that you, from this day forward, will navigate with surgical precision. Let us begin with the most common battlefield, the workplace. Tactic 1. The power of the delayed response. You receive a message, an email, a text, a request from a colleague, a supervisor, someone who believes their timeline is your priority. The instinct, the deeply conditioned people-pleasing instinct, is to respond immediately, to show you are available, to show you are eager, to show you are a good team player. But here is what immediate response actually communicates. I have nothing more important than you. My time is unoccupied. My attention is cheap. Machiavelli would counsel differently. He understood that time is a weapon, not in the sense of wasting it, but in the sense of controlling its pace. When you delay your response, not excessively, not rudely, but strategically, you communicate something profound. My attention is allocated elsewhere. My time has competing demands. My response to you is something I choose to give, not something you are entitled to extract. Here is how this works in practice. Someone sends you a message at 10 in the morning, demanding something by noon. The reactive person drops everything and scrambles. The strategic person reads the message, assesses its true urgency, which is almost never as urgent as the sender claims, and responds at 11:45 with a calm, precise answer. The content of the response is the same, but the timing has communicated an entirely different relationship to power. Now, there are exceptions. Genuine emergencies require genuine urgency. A message from someone you deeply respect deserves timely attention. But these are calibrated decisions, not reflexive habits. The person who responds to everything instantly has no calibration. They are a machine that generates output the moment input arrives. And machines are not respected, they are used. Apply this starting today. When you receive a non-urgent request, pause. Finish what you are doing. Respond when you are ready, not when they demand. And notice how the dynamic shifts. Notice how people begin to frame their requests differently, with more courtesy, more context, more respect, because they have learned that your attention is not something they can summon on command. Tactic 2. The mirror of silence in confrontation. Someone confronts you. A colleague challenges your decision in front of others. A friend accuses you of something you did not do. A partner brings up an old wound in the middle of an unrelated conversation. The reactive person, the untrained person, responds with defense. They explain, they justify, they counter-accuse, they escalate. And in escalating, they hand over every shred of authority they possess. Here is the Machiavellian response. When someone confronts you, especially in public, do this. Hold their gaze. Do not look away. Do not blink excessively. Do not shift your weight. Let the silence stretch for 2 full seconds before you speak. Then say, in a tone that is measured, unhurried, and completely devoid of emotional volatility, that is an interesting perspective. I will give it the consideration it deserves. And then, this is crucial. Change the subject, or return to your task, or simply excuse yourself from the conversation with quiet grace. Do not explain further. Do not engage with their accusation. Do not give them the reaction they are hunting for. What happens next is remarkable. The person who confronted you will feel, immediately and viscerally, that they have miscalculated. They expected heat. They received ice. They expected a battle. They received a wall. And walls do not fight back. They simply stand, unmoved, while the person throwing punches exhausts themselves. Machiavelli wrote, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception," and I would extend this to say, Never attempt to win by reaction what can be won by composure. The person who remains composed in the face of provocation wins every time. Not because they have the best argument, but because they have demonstrated the one thing that cannot be faked: emotional sovereignty. Now let me give you the specific phrases. Memorize these. They are precision instruments designed for moments of confrontation. When someone accuses you unfairly, I hear you, I see this differently, but I respect your right to your perspective. Then silence. When someone tries to bait you into an argument, I am not going to engage with this in the way you are expecting, but I am willing to discuss it when the temperature comes down. Then exit. When someone attempts to guilt you into compliance, I understand that this is important to you. My decision stands, and I trust you will understand that in time. When someone dismisses your contribution in a meeting, do not react in the moment. Wait. After the meeting, approach the person privately and say, I noticed you had a strong reaction to my suggestion earlier. I would be curious to understand your thinking. This achieves two things. First, it signals that you noticed, that nothing escapes your attention. Second, it forces them to articulate their position without the protection of an audience. Most people are brave in groups and cowardly one-on-one. Use that. When someone gives you a backhanded compliment, thank you. I appreciate the honesty. Say it with a faint, knowing smile. Nothing more. The smile communicates, I see exactly what you did, and I am choosing not to dignify it with a reaction. This is devastating, because backhanded compliments rely on the target not recognizing them. When you recognize one and respond with grace, you have inverted the power dynamic completely. The person who threw the jab feels exposed. The person who received it appears untouchable. Tactic 3. The art of strategic agreement. This is one of Machiavelli's most misunderstood principles, and it is one of the most powerful tools in your arsenal. Most people believe that disagreement is strength and agreement is weakness. They are wrong. Strategic agreement, the ability to validate someone's position before redirecting it, is one of the most sophisticated forms of influence that exists. Here is how it works. Someone proposes something you disagree with. Instead of saying no, you say, I see the logic in that, and I think we can take it even further. Then you introduce your actual position, framed not as a contradiction, but as an evolution of their idea. What have you done? You have avoided triggering their defensive mechanisms. You have made them feel heard and respected. You have maintained the appearance of collaboration while steering the outcome toward your desired destination. And most critically, you have made it nearly impossible for them to argue against you, because arguing against your position now means arguing against their own, since you have positioned yours as an extension of theirs. Machiavelli mastered this technique in his diplomatic career. He did not walk into negotiations saying, "You are wrong, and here is why." He walked in saying, "Your position has merit, and here is how we can build on it to achieve something neither of us could achieve alone." The outcome was the same. He got what he wanted. But the process left the other party feeling victorious. And a person who feels victorious never suspects they have been outmaneuvered. Use this in your professional life. Use this in your relationships. Use this in any situation where direct opposition would create more friction than it resolves. You are not being dishonest. You are being intelligent. There is a world of difference between lying about your position and framing your position in a way that others can receive without hostility. Tactic 4. The controlled revelation. Information is power. This is not a metaphor. This is a literal, operational truth that governs every sphere of human interaction. And the way you manage information, what you share, what you withhold, when you reveal and how you frame it, determines your position in every dynamic you enter. Here is the common mistake. Most people share information democratically. They tell the same things to everyone. They process their thoughts out loud. They update people in real time on their plans, their feelings, their strategies. And in doing so, they make themselves completely transparent, which, as we established, means completely controllable. The strategic approach is radically different. You share different information with different people, calibrated to the relationship and the context. You reveal your plans only after they are in motion, not before. Because a plan that is announced before execution invites interference, but a plan that is revealed after success invites admiration. You share your vulnerabilities only with those who have proven, repeatedly, through action, that they will guard them. And you never, under any circumstances, share your full strategy with anyone who has not earned that level of trust. Machiavelli was explicit about this. He wrote that a prudent prince cannot and should not keep his word when doing so would work against him, and when the reasons that led him to make promises no longer apply. This is not about breaking promises. It is about controlling the flow of information so that your promises are strategic rather than reflexive, considered rather than compulsive, calculated rather than careless. In practice, this means several things. It means when someone asks you what you are working on, you do not give them the full picture. You give them enough to satisfy their curiosity without exposing your strategy. I have a few things in development. I will share more when the time is right. This response is honest, it is polite, and it is impenetrable. It means when someone asks you how you feel about a situation, you do not pour out your unfiltered emotions. You share what serves the conversation and protect what does not. I have thought about it. I have reached a conclusion I am comfortable with. This response acknowledges the question without surrendering to it. It means when you succeed at something, you do not explain every step of how you did it. You let the result speak. Let people wonder. Let them fill in the gaps with their own imagination, which will always make you seem more impressive than any detailed explanation could. Because the moment you explain the magic trick, you are no longer a magician. You are just a person with a manual. Tactic 5. The power of the exit. Here is a truth that will save you years of wasted energy. The most powerful move in any dynamic is the willingness to leave. Not the threat to leave, not the dramatic announcement of departure, the genuine, quiet, unshakable willingness to walk away from anything that does not serve your purpose. In a negotiation, the person who can walk away from the deal is the person who sets the terms. In a relationship, the person who can survive alone is the person who is never taken for granted. In a friendship, the person who does not need the group is the person the group cannot afford to lose. In a career, the person who is willing to resign is the person who is most likely to be promoted. Machiavelli understood this with crystalline precision. He watched princes cling to alliances that drained them, generals hold positions that were indefensible, leaders maintain relationships that weakened their authority, all because they feared the perceived cost of withdrawal more than the actual cost of staying. And he watched every single one of them lose. Because clinging is not strength. Clinging is fear wearing the mask of loyalty. Here is how to apply this. In any situation where you feel trapped, exploited, or undervalued, ask yourself one question. What would happen if I left? Not in anger, not in drama. Just quietly, decisively, permanently. If the answer is that the other party would suffer more from your absence than you would from leaving, you have power. Use it. Not by threatening. Threats are the weapons of the weak, but by beginning, quietly and systematically, to build alternatives, build other options. Cultivate other relationships, develop other skills, create other paths, and here is the paradox. The moment the other party senses, not hears, but senses, that you have options, their behavior changes. They become more attentive, more generous, more respectful, not because they have suddenly discovered your worth, but because they have suddenly discovered the possibility of your absence. And your absence, the version of their life without you in it, terrifies them far more than your presence ever comforted them. This is the final tactic, and it is, in many ways, the synthesis of everything that came before. Controlled silence preserves your power. Strategic emotional distance protects your energy. Mystery amplifies your presence. Calculated generosity ensures your resources are invested wisely. The sovereignty of purpose gives you direction. And the willingness to exit gives you freedom. This is the final tactic, and it is, in many ways, the synthesis of everything that came before. Controlled silence preserves your power. Strategic emotional distance protects your energy. Mystery amplifies your presence. Calculated generosity ensures your resources are invested wisely. The sovereignty of purpose gives you direction, and the willingness to exit gives you freedom. Let me give you one more scenario, one that brings all of these tactics together into a single, real-world moment. You are at a dinner party. Someone you know, an acquaintance, not a friend, begins subtly undermining you in front of the group. They disguise it as humor. "Oh, you are still working on that little project of yours?" The group laughs. They look at you, waiting for your reaction. The untrained version of you would do one of two things: either laugh along, swallowing the insult like a bitter pill, or fire back with something defensive that makes you look reactive and thin-skinned. Both responses serve the underminer. Both give them what they want. Here is what you do instead. You do not laugh. You do not fire back. You pause. You look at them, not with anger, not with hurt, but with the calm, steady gaze of someone who has just received a piece of very useful information. Then you say, with the faintest trace of a smile, "You seem very interested in what I am building. I appreciate that." And then you turn to someone else at the table and change the subject entirely. You do not look back at the underminer. You do not check their reaction. You simply move on, as if they were a minor disturbance in an otherwise pleasant evening. What have you done? You have acknowledged their attempt without validating it. You have reframed their insult as admiration. Publicly, you have refused to give them the emotional reaction they were fishing for, and most devastatingly, you have communicated to every person at that table that their little jab did not even register on your radar. You are operating on a different level, and everyone in the room can feel it. This is what it looks like when the 5 pillars and the 5 tactics work together. Silence. You did not overreact. Distance. Their opinion did not penetrate your emotional core. Mystery. No one at the table knows what you are actually thinking. Calculated generosity. You gave them a response, but one that served your interests, not theirs. Purpose. You have something real to build, and their opinion of it is irrelevant. Exit. You left the conversation on your terms, not theirs. This is mastery, and it is available to you starting tonight. Now let us address the mistakes, the traps that even intelligent people fall into when they begin to apply these principles. The first trap is overcompensation. You learn about strategic silence, and you become a mute. You learn about emotional distance, and you become a statue. You learn about mystery, and you become evasive. This is not the goal. The goal is calibration, not extremity. You are not trying to become a machine. You are trying to become a person who chooses their responses rather than reacting by default. There is a vast difference between someone who is strategically quiet and someone who is simply absent. The first is magnetic. The second is forgettable. The second trap is cynicism. You learn about the mechanics of influence, and you begin to see manipulation everywhere. Every compliment becomes suspicious. Every kindness becomes a transaction. Every friend becomes a potential adversary. This is poison, And Machiavelli himself would warn you against it. He was a realist, not a nihilist. He believed in loyalty. He simply believed it should be earned, tested, and verified, rather than assumed. He believed in love. He simply acknowledged that fear was a more reliable guarantor of consistent behavior. He believed in goodness. He simply insisted that goodness without awareness is a lamb inviting the wolves. The third trap is isolation. You take the principles of sovereignty and mystery and you retreat from the world entirely. You stop reaching out. You stop connecting. You build walls instead of boundaries. And slowly, you realize that you have achieved invulnerability at the cost of humanity. This is not what Machiavelli taught. He taught engagement, strategic, calculated, purposeful engagement with the world, not retreat from it. The prince who locks himself in his tower is not powerful. He is irrelevant. Power requires a stage, influence requires an audience, and impact requires contact. Avoid these traps. They are not signs of strength. They are signs of misapplication. The true student of Machiavelli is not the cold, isolated cynic. The true student is the warm, connected, deeply feeling person who has learned to protect their warmth from those who would exploit it, to channel their connection toward those who deserve it, and to direct their feelings toward the purpose that defines them. This is the transformation that is underway in you right now, not from soft to hard, not from naive to cynical, but from unconscious to deliberate, from reactive to responsive, from a person who is moved by the world to a person who moves through it with intention. And at this point, something has already changed in you. You may not have words for it yet, but something behind your eyes is different. A certain filter has been installed. A certain lens has been placed over your perception. And through that lens, you will begin to see things you never noticed before. The micro-manipulations, the power plays disguised as small talk, the loyalty tests embedded in casual questions, the entire invisible machinery of human influence that has been operating around you your entire life. This is the transformation, and it is irreversible. But there is one final layer, one final revelation that ties everything together and gives you something that most people search for and never find. A way of being in the world that is simultaneously powerful and peaceful, strategic and authentic, calculated and deeply, unapologetically human. That revelation is coming. And it is the most important thing I will say in this entire video. Stay right here. The final descent begins now. Something is different now. Can you feel it? There is a stillness in you that was not there when this video began. Not the stillness of emptiness, the stillness of depth. Like a body of water that has settled after a storm. The surface is calm, but beneath it, everything has been rearranged. An hour ago, or close to it, you were a different person. Not weaker, not worse, just unaware. You lived in a world of surfaces, and you took those surfaces at face value. You believed that words meant what they said, that actions were always what they appeared, that the people around you were operating from the same playbook you were, and in that belief, you were vulnerable. Not because you were foolish, but because you were honest in a world that does not always reward honesty. Now, you have been given something that cannot be returned. You have been given sight, and sight, once granted, cannot be revoked. You will walk out of this room, or put down your phone or close this tab, and the world will be the same. The same streets, the same faces, the same conversations. But you will not be the same, because you now see the wires, you see the puppet strings, you see the invisible negotiations that govern every handshake, every pause, every unanswered message, every carefully timed compliment, every strategic withdrawal of affection. You see it all, and what you see cannot be unseen. This is what Machiavelli intended. Not to make you cynical, not to make you hard, but to make you awake. to rip away the comfortable blindfold that society placed over your eyes when you were too young to protest, and to show you the terrain as it actually is, rocky, dangerous, beautiful, and navigable. Because the world is not hostile. It is simply indifferent, and indifference, once understood, is the most liberating truth you will ever encounter. Because it means the world is not working against you. It is simply not working for you, and the moment you accept that, the moment you stop waiting for the world to recognize your value and start demonstrating it on your own terms, everything changes. Let me paint a picture for you. I want you to see the person you are becoming. This person wakes up in the morning, and the first thing they feel is not anxiety about the day ahead, but a quiet certainty about who they are and what they are building. They do not check their phone immediately. They do not seek the validation of notifications. They do not measure their worth by the number of messages they received overnight. They rise, and in that rising, there is sovereignty. Not because they have achieved everything they want, but because they have become someone who is worthy of everything they pursue. This person walks into a room and does not perform. They do not laugh louder than they feel. They do not agree when they disagree. They do not shrink to make others comfortable. But neither do they expand to fill space that is not theirs. They occupy exactly the amount of room they deserve, no more, no less. And that precision, that refusal to inflate or deflate based on the expectations of others, is what gives them gravity. People are drawn to them not because they are entertaining, but because they are real. And in a world drowning in performance, reality is the rarest currency there is. This person speaks and people listen, not because their voice is loud, but because their silence has made their words expensive. When they offer an opinion, it carries the weight of careful consideration. When they make a promise, it carries the weight of certainty. When they say no, it is absolute. When they say yes, it is deliberate. There is no ambiguity in their communication because there is no ambiguity in their self-knowledge. They know who they are. They know what they want. They know what they will accept and what they will not. And that clarity, that diamond-hard clarity, is visible in every word they speak and every action they take. This person loves deeply, perhaps more deeply than the person they were before this video. Because love that is chosen is more powerful than love that is compulsive. Love that comes from fullness is more nourishing than love that comes from need. This person does not love because they are afraid of being alone. They love because they have been alone, truly, comfortably, peacefully alone, and they have discovered that solitude is not punishment. It is preparation. It is the furnace in which the self is forged. And a self that has been forged in solitude does not cling, does not beg, does not dissolve into another person. It stands beside them, equal, sovereign, chosen. This person faces betrayal and does not crumble, not because they do not feel the pain. They feel it acutely, perhaps more acutely than most, because their awareness has heightened every sensation. But they have learned something that the uninitiated never understand. Betrayal is information. It is not a verdict on your worth. It is a revelation of someone else's character, and a revelation, no matter how painful, is always a gift, because it replaces illusion with truth. And truth, however brutal, is always more useful than fantasy. This person faces betrayal and does not crumble. Not because they do not feel the pain, they feel it acutely, perhaps more acutely than most, because their awareness has heightened every sensation. But they have learned something that the uninitiated never understand. Betrayal is information. It is not a verdict on your worth. It is a revelation of someone else's character. And a revelation, no matter how painful, is always a gift, because it replaces illusion with truth. And truth, however brutal, is always more useful than fantasy. When this person is betrayed, they do not seek revenge. Revenge is the hobby of the emotionally imprisoned. Instead, they do something far more devastating. They redirect. They take the energy that betrayal generates, and it generates enormous energy. A furnace of rage and grief and disbelief, and they pour it into their purpose. They let the pain fuel the work instead of fueling destruction. And months later, when the person who betrayed them sees the life they have built from the wreckage, that is the only vengeance worth having. Not because it was designed as revenge, but because it was designed as rebirth. And there is nothing more unsettling to someone who tried to break you than the sight of you, unbroken, thriving, indifferent to their existence. Machiavelli wrote, "The best fortress which a prince can possess is the affection of his people." But I will add this: the best fortress you can possess is the architecture of your own becoming. When you have built yourself into something that cannot be dismantled by the actions of others, no betrayal can truly harm you. It can wound you. It can slow you. But it cannot stop you, because you are not defined by what was done to you. You are defined by what you built after. This person has enemies, not because they are cruel, but because they are powerful. And power, true power, the kind that does not apologize for its own existence, always generates friction. Machiavelli knew this. He wrote that a prince who tries to be loved by everyone will be despised by everyone. The person you are becoming does not try to be loved by everyone. They try to be respected by the worthy, feared by the manipulative, and irrelevant to the petty. And in that calibration, they find a peace that the people-pleaser will never know. Now let me consolidate what you have learned. Because knowledge that is not organized is knowledge that will be forgotten. You learned that the world operates on perception, not reality. That the person who controls the narrative controls the outcome. That appearances are not superficial, they are strategic. And that taking charge of how you are perceived is not vanity, it is survival. You learned that your greatest vulnerability is your need to be understood. That the impulse to explain, to justify, to defend your intentions is the single most exploitable weakness you possess. And that learning to endure misunderstanding, to let people be wrong about you without feeling the need to correct them, is one of the most liberating skills you will ever develop. You learned the 5 pillars: controlled silence, which transforms your words from noise into currency; strategic emotional distance, which protects your energy from those who would drain it; the architecture of mystery, which amplifies your presence by controlling your visibility; calculated generosity, which ensures your resources flow toward the worthy rather than the parasitic; and the sovereignty of purpose, which anchors everything to a mission that is uniquely and unapologetically yours. You learned the tactics, the delayed response that communicates value, the mirror of silence that inverts confrontation, the strategic agreement that disarms opposition, the controlled revelation that manages information, and the power of the exit that ensures you are never trapped. You learned the traps: overcompensation that turns strategy into extremity, cynicism that turns awareness into poison, and isolation that turns sovereignty into exile. And you learned something else, something that no one said explicitly, but that ran through every word like an underground river. You learned that the opposite of weakness is not aggression, it is precision. The opposite of naivety is not cynicism, it is discernment. The opposite of being used is not using others. It is being so anchored in your own value that the question of exploitation becomes irrelevant. Because a person who knows their worth does not enter arrangements where that worth is not recognized. They do not beg for seats at tables that were never designed to accommodate them. They build their own table, and they choose, with great care, who gets to sit there. This is the Machiavellian mindset fully realized. Not as a toolkit for manipulation, but as a philosophical orientation toward life itself. An orientation that says, I will see the world clearly. I will navigate its complexity with intelligence. I will protect my inner world from the chaos of the outer world. And I will build something meaningful, not to impress others, not to prove my critics wrong, not to gain approval, but because the act of building is itself the highest expression of who I am. Machiavelli spent his final years in exile from the Florence he loved. He was stripped of his position, tortured for alleged conspiracy, and left to farm land that did not excite him, while the political world he understood better than anyone continued without him. And yet, in that exile, he wrote The Prince, a work that has influenced leaders, thinkers, strategists, and revolutionaries for over 5 centuries. He turned his suffering into legacy. He transformed his exclusion into eternal relevance. He did not win his battle in his lifetime, but he won the war across all lifetimes that followed. If that is not a testament to the sovereignty of purpose, nothing is. And now, you are ready for the paradox, the final truth, the one that ties all of this together and gives it its deepest meaning. Here it is, and I want you to hold this one in your chest, not your mind. The ultimate act of power is not control over others. It is liberation from the need to control others. Read that again. The person who has truly internalized everything in this video does not walk around trying to manipulate the people around them. They do not spend their energy calculating every move in every interaction.